We shall begin week 12. Can you believe it? I'm not going to go all the way back to the beginning to review, but I do want to put the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks ago, last week, and this week kind of together, and we'll review those because I think there is a bit of a connection between them. A couple weeks ago, we looked at Yahweh Zedekenu, which is the Lord our righteousness, and we talked about that this is the idea that we see ultimately in Jesus, that righteousness is credited to our account. And so way back in Judges, we get this idea that God credits his righteousness to his people. And we talked about that word Zedekenu is rooted in another word, Zedekiah, which means, as its heart, generosity. And so we see that part of God's righteousness is his generosity toward us. And we looked at that as past tense salvation. What we would say is justification, maybe, that we were saved. Part of becoming saved or being saved in the past tense is that God credits his righteousness to us because the Lord is our righteousness. It's not our righteousness, it's as filthy rags, it's his righteousness credited to our account. And then last week, we did the present tense salvation idea with Yahweh Mekadeshim, which means the Lord who makes you holy. We talked about that as sanctification. And we spent a lot of time looking at the idea of holy as the concept of not just of being good. Usually we think of holy, we think of that means behaving right. But we looked at it like from its earliest origins around the Sabbath is where it particularly shows up in Genesis 2. It's to make something set apart, to make it different or other. So when God is holy, it means there's nothing else like him. And he set aside, beginning with Israel, a people for himself. And part of what he does in the law is give them certain ways of acting that distinguishes them from all the other peoples around him, that they would be for him a treasured possession. This idea that they're his, and that part of what it means to be his is that we not just were saved because his righteousness is credited to our account, but the process of our life is the process of being saved, being sanctified, being increasingly set apart, marked, as it were, as unique to the God who is also unique. So part of who we are as God's people is holy, not just because we're holier than thou or better than everybody, but because we're different, we're other. We should be marked in that way. So that was the present tense. So that only leaves one tense, past, present, and future. There you go. And we talked about that as being glorified, that we have been saved, we are being saved, and one day we will be saved when all of this stuff that we're still dealing with is behind us and we are part of his eternal kingdom. So tonight's name deals with that very particular idea. We find it in the very last phrase of the book of Ezekiel. So before we get to that last phrase, let's just brief. Who is Ezekiel? What is this about? Fascinating book. Ezekiel is a prophet of God, a priest and a prophet that is in captivity in Babylon. Starts by the Kabar River in captivity in Babylon. He's one of the early waves of captives that's taken away. Jerusalem has not fallen yet. In fact, it's in chapter 33 that a messenger comes to Ezekiel and he learns Jerusalem has finally fallen. So he is a captive taken away in the first wave of people removed from Israel as the Babylonians came in. And one of the things he sees in chapter 1 is the throne and the glory of God, this wild vision of the throne of God. And so what he does is from this vision begins to prophesy to the people in captivity. And he does some crazy stuff. I mean, it's just wild. Part of it prophetically isn't just, I'm going to go and give you a message. It's he acts some things out. So one thing he gets to do is to spend a lot of time lying on one side. He builds a little model of Jerusalem and he lies on one side. Just that would be uncomfortable, wouldn't it? And he gets to cook his food on. Any guesses? Yep, poo-poo. Dung. God said, do it on human dung. He bargained, and it just had to be cow dung. Isn't that exciting? Yeah. It's good to be a prophet, isn't it? And so he does this. At another point, he shaves his head, and he goes into the city, and he throws his hair, and he chops it up with a sword. It's just crazy stuff that he does. You probably know some of the passages in Ezekiel. Probably one of the best known is the Valley of Dry Bones. That's an Ezekiel passage where shall these bones live, prophesy to the dry bones, and the spirit moves over the bones. So this is Ezekiel. He is one of God's people who is a prophet not before exile, but in exile. He's in exile with the other Israelites, and he's telling them, well, you've really blown it, and if you don't get right, it's only going to get worse. Okay, so this is Ezekiel. But he goes through his whole book, and I'm not going to try, we're going to spend a lot of time in Ezekiel tonight. I will not hit everything. We will not cover the whole book of Ezekiel in 45 minutes or however long we're here. But the very last phrase of the last verse of Ezekiel is this, where he says, and the name of the city from that time on will be, here's our name of God, the Lord is there. Jehovah or Yahweh Shammah, the Lord is there. So when we get here, if you were to back up to about chapter 40, I think, maybe 41, through the end of the book, Ezekiel describes a temple and the division of land earlier in chapter 48 of the people of Israel, and all of this sort of the dimensions of this temple don't make sense to anything that has been. So obviously it's a future temple he's talking about, and at the end of it, what he says about all of this to a people in exile is he wants them to be left with this message of hope. The Lord is there. Would that be important to the people of Israel? All of their identity, one of the things that was unique about them was that God was among them. Told them building a tabernacle. Later they built a temple, and God was going to dwell among them. So we're going to talk about where is the Lord? If you're talking from an ancient Israelite, this is 400 BC, 500 BC, 586 BC is the fall of Jerusalem and Babylon. So this is 600 years BC. If you're talking about for Israel, what represented the presence of the Lord is there, this would be the building. Now, this is probably more Solomon's temple than, Herod's temple than Solomon's temple. This particular design has more of that thing, but this is a model. I believe it's in the Holy Land is where this particular model, although there are several different places, a model of the temple. So I want to just spend a few minutes. Can you see that at all? You know, it looks really big on my screen, and then when I put it on this screen, it looks really small. I've looked at a couple other pictures we have, and I'll do my best. Maybe I should move the screen here. I don't know. So this is the temple here. This tall building would be kind of the temple proper. It's divided roughly in half, and the back half is what we would call the Holy of Holies. So if you were to go to Jerusalem now, this is not here, but this is the western wall of the temple, at least in this model, but you can still go to. It's called the Wailing Wall, the holiest site for many Israelites in Jerusalem that you could go to. It's still there. It's one of the extant parts of Solomon's temple that's still there, even though the temple itself is no longer there. We'll look at a picture a little bit later and see what is there now, but nonetheless. So this is the western wall. The Holy of Holies is the back half of this building. And then you've got the front half is the holy place as opposed to the most holy place. The court where the priest would be, the altar and all that, and then court of the men, the court of the Gentiles, and then this orientation of this temple, this is important, is toward the east. So this would be the eastern gate, as it were. And this would be the east gate to the city. This would be the eastern entrance or gate to the temple itself. Which way does it orient? It orients facing east. One of the things that happens in Ezekiel that's particularly damning to the people of Israel is Ezekiel is transported to the temple in Jerusalem. And he receives a series of visions of what's happening. And the refrain that shows up several times is, I will show you things more detestable than this. And each time it's a greater sinful, detestable act that people do. And the last of them is the priests are standing in the temple facing east, worshiping the sun god, which means their backs are to who? God himself, who's inside, they believe, sits enthroned in this particular part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, over the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubim that are there. So, if you're an Israelite, this piece of real estate, this part in the city of Jerusalem, this structure represents for you the very presence and blessing of God. If this is okay, you're okay. If this is not okay, you're not okay, right? Which is why still to this day, that piece of real estate is coveted by the nation of Israel, even though there are actually a couple of Islamic mosques on the site. Most closely to the temple is the Dome of the Rock, which you may be familiar with, that kind of gold dome, which is not the holiest site on the Temple Mount. There's another mosque on this side that is actually, I think it's the second or third holiest site in all of Islam, behind Mecca, Medina. So that would make it third. That's on this side. I don't remember the name of it. The Dome of the Rock is the one that's most prominent, the one we most often associate, but it's not the holiest site on that piece of real estate, but it is right here, approximately where this structure would have been. So the Israelites are not okay because the temple is not there and they can't do the things that they want to do. That's been the case since 70 AD. Romans destroyed the temple.
Well, don't they still want to rebuild the temple?
There are those who would love to rebuild it.
Because
there are always things percolating and circulating, like we're going to get it. They're doing all sorts of archaeological work underneath the Dome of the Rock. To get to the Temple Mount, if you've not been to the Holy Land, you go through an armed checkpoint.
Yeah.
The Israeli army, all of the metal detectors, the scanners, it's like airport security, even heightened to go from the Israeli territory of that part of Jerusalem through onto the Muslim site that is the Temple Mount. And you've seen in the news, there's sometimes Muslim holy days, sometimes there are conflicts, there are things that happen on this particular piece of real estate that are still to this day, it's tension around the city and around this real estate. Because for Israel, this is where God dwells. And I will make my dwelling among you. So back to the story of Ezekiel. Where is Ezekiel when this happens? He's in Babylon. And in chapter 1, what does he see? The presence and the glory of God on his chariot throne. Wait a minute. Where's God supposed to be? He's supposed to be in Jerusalem. Why is he way over there in Babylon? I'm glad you asked. Ezekiel chapter 10. Then the glory of the Lord departed from over the threshold of the temple and stopped above the cherubim. The cherubim are part of the chariot type throne at this point, the wheeled throne that's there. And while I watched, the cherubim spread their wings, rose from the ground, and as they went, the wheels went with them. They stopped at the entrance of what? What is that again? There it is, the east gate of the Lord's house, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. So back to our picture. God is enthroned over the cherubim inside the Holy of Holies, the golden cherubim that are on the mercy seat. And now these other cherubim have shown up. The real cherubim, not the images of the cherubim, have shown up with God's kind of multi-wheeled throne, and he's exiting. He's exiting from the Holy of Holies to the threshold of the temple, from the threshold of the temple to the eastern gate of the temple. He's moving out of there. But he's not done. He's going to move some more. Then the cherubim, next chapter, Ezekiel 11, with the wheels beside them, spread their wings, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. The glory of the Lord went up from within the city and stopped above the mountain east of it. Now, do you know what mountain is east of Jerusalem?
Arrakis.
Arrakis? No. What'd you say?
Olives, maybe?
The Mount of Olives. Here's whoops. Wait. Here we go. Nope. There it is. I know you can't see this. This is a satellite overhead view. This is the Temple Mount. This particular structure here is the Dome of the Rock. And I don't know if you can see, this says the Mount of Olives Road. This is the Mount of Olives. So east of the city, the mountain that's east of the city is this. If you can tell up here, at the top of the Mount of Olives is something called the Chapel of the Ascension. Little preview. Where does Jesus ascend into heaven from? Mount of Olives. And if you were to go to the Mount of Olives today, as I did years ago, usually take this walk down this road, usually this road here, start up here at the Chapel of the Ascension, and it's a very steep road down, very narrow road that you also share with vehicles, so that's exciting. And you walk down and around, and you'll come to several chapels. This Dominus Flevit Chapel has the most different language versions of the Lord's Prayer in it. It's also a place where you can stop, where it's thought that Jesus lamented over Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how long to use a hen gathers the chicks under a desk. A little bit further, the Church of Mary Magdalene is a Russian Orthodox church, so it's got like the I don't know, yes, what I would call them like almost minarets. You would look at it and think it looks a little Muslim because it's got those little dome towers on it, but it's Russian Orthodox for the record. And then you get down to the bottom of the Mount of Olives and you have the Garden of Gethsemane. And there's a chapel there, I forget what it's called, but inside that church, there's a big stone slab that's thought to be the place, and if you buy that, where Jesus actually prayed on the night after the Lord's Supper before he was arrested. So you go there and there are people just weeping over this stone where Jesus prayed. It's really remarkable. It's inside the church. I thought it was much cooler that outside the church, the olive grove that is there, Garden of Gethsemane means olive press. There's olive trees there that were there when Jesus was there. But there are 2,000 plus year old olive trees in this garden. It is remarkable. And I just wanted to walk around the garden. I mean, there's dozens of them. It's not just one. Massive trunks of these olive trees. So I wasn't so much to go to the church and see the stone as like, maybe that was the tree Jesus prayed. Maybe that, I don't know where he prayed, but it's a beautiful little garden. There's also olive trees up top, hence the name Mount of Olives. Now you might notice all of this barren looking land. You know what this is?
Yes, sir.
Nope. The most expensive cemetery in Israel. This, if you are a good Jew, you want to be buried in this cemetery. And there are still places available for the low price of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a burial plot. And the reason you want to be buried here is because you're on the Mount of Olives and something significant is supposed to happen on the Mount of Olives. We'll get to that in a little bit. And so this is a huge Jewish cemetery we'll get to that. But remember that, cemetery. So Jesus, as he's walking down on Palm Sunday, is walking, this cemetery isn't new, it's been there a long time. He's walking down from an olive grove to an olive grove by a cemetery. And interestingly enough, in the cemetery, when we go to a cemetery, remember somebody, what do we take? Flowers, right? You put flowers. There are no flowers in the cemetery. To go and remember somebody in the cemetery, you take a little stone or a rock. So all these graves, these crypts will have stones stacked on top of them. It's kind of an odd thing. I'm going to give my wife rocks for Valentine's Day. I'll let you know how that goes.
Not well.
Is she watching? I don't know. Find out. I'll bet it's spoil the surprise, honey. Anyway, so this is where we are. And so the mountain east of the city, so approximately here is the Temple Mount and where the temple would have been, and then the eastern gate, and then the mountain east of the city. So the direction of the glory of God is east. It is out of the place where Israel, people of Israel, looked to see the presence of God, which is why in Ezekiel 1, Ezekiel can see the presence and the glory of God, because the glory of God isn't hanging out where it's supposed to be hanging out. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that God is limited to being in that building, because he's not, right? So don't hear me say that. I'm just saying, in the mind of Israel, this is where God is supposed to be, and Ezekiel sees him in Babylon because he ain't there no more, and he prophesies, he has this vision where he says to his people, the glory of God has left the building. This is bad news all around.
What year was it?
586 is when Jerusalem falls, so it's before that.
BC.
8 to 10 years maybe before that. So this is where
a picture and showing where was Jesus on the cross. Show it on here.
so I don't know if you can see it, the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. I say it like that because that's how Sandy Petty sang it. Sorry. Anybody else know that song? Anyway, so it's there is a church somewhere here that's called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That is thought to be inside that church. Both there's a place you can go where he was thought to be crucified, and then the tomb, it's traditionally believed a little bit further away. Same building, not like right up next to each other, a little bit farther apart where he was thought to be laid. So you can, when we were there,
Was west of.
so yeah, it's on the western side. There's another place that's a little bit more removed. I think it's like up here, called the Garden Tomb. That some people, it's not a church. It's actually a garden. It's still outdoors. It's beautiful. As a Baptist who's not into all the trappings of Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Roman Catholic churches, which these churches share, those are the three main faiths, and they're so ornate, and they're full of icons and full of tapestries. I gravitate more toward the more natural kind of things that aren't dressed up, and maybe that's just a Baptist thing because we saw lots of Catholics and lots of Greek Orthodox, lots of others that were drawn into these places with services and whatnot. It didn't do much for me. I'd rather be outside. I mean, I think I told you my favorite place was a field. There was nothing there but grass, but I loved it. Anyway, does that answer your question? Do we know where he was crucified? No. What we do know is both the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Garden Tomb are outside the ancient walls of the city because they would not, in Israel, crucify someone inside the city walls. They have to go outside the city. But the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is very much in the city today, the modern city. It's in the middle of lots of things.
Sanhedrin inside the wall.
Yes, the Sanhedrin would have met at the temple. That would have been their headquarters. So it's remarkable. If you can go one day, assuming stuff isn't crazy in that part of the world, it is a remarkable trip to take because you read things in the Bible and you're like, wait a minute, I saw that. I know what that's talking about. Even though the temple's not there, they have what's called the teaching steps, which were there in Jesus's day, and it's where he would have taught. And there's actually a road in another part of the city, sort of near the temple, that's 2,000 years old. It was probably on that very path, and it's just kind of a little stone walkway where Jesus was led when he was arrested toward the high priest's house. So there are places like that, just remarkable. Again, I don't like the fact that every holy site is a church and you have to pay to get into, and you have to pay to use the bathroom, and you got all the other stuff because it's making money. But it is remarkable. And I would encourage you, and maybe we'll lead a trip there when things calm down. Yes, sir.
How compact and why? I've always heard that not that large an area.
So the ancient city was pretty small.
Yeah, that's what I always heard. And then, of course, the other additions came up over centuries.
Yeah.
And it's still not that large.
It's
But-
not New York City,
Well,
but it's a pretty big
I
city.
guess, okay. But I mean, every block is another holy site church.
There are lots of places there. I know this is not the Linton, but it's fascinating to me. So I'll just talk about it. There's actually quarters. There's the Armenian quarter.
Yeah.
There's the Muslim quarter. There's the Christian quarter. There's the Jewish quarter. And there's like a centerpiece where the spokes go out, and you can walk into those four quarters, and they're perfectly safe. Most of them are.
walkable. It's not like you have to have a car.
No, you don't need to get. It's far enough apart. You wouldn't want. The Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering, the stations of the cross, if you're from a Catholic background, is walkable. They usually drop you off at the Praetorium where you start and you do the 12, I think it's 12 stations of the cross, and you end up at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that's a small, because that was, again, ancient Israel, ancient Jerusalem, where Jesus went from point A to point B and they walked everywhere they went.
Right.
But the city has grown. The old city, the city of David is a smaller part of the city as well, which I think is somewhere. Yeah, I think this, as you can tell, this is in Hebrew. This is I forget the name of that place. We went there. Might even be the Tower of David or something.
And then the size of the cemetery is fascinating. That's a quarter shot here.
It's a big cemetery. I don't know the scale of this map, so I can't tell you.
I mean, in my thoughts, obviously the cemetery's been there since before Christ,
Some of it.
and originally because the city was, and it's grown over the years. But, I was always told that the city's not as think of being here in America, everything's big, spread out, and you get there. It's all.
So it's like any city, you've got the ancient part is very small.
Yeah.
The historic part is very small, but because of the nature of life and tourism,
Oh, yeah.
you have to have a whole structure around it to support all the people. Now, the other dynamic is Jerusalem is up, surrounded by mountains. You go down a couple of valleys to sit. So it's limited a little bit by the size of the hill it's on, but the city itself has spread out from there. The modern city.
And then, of course, you have to deal with the how many religions are represented. 4, besides the Jews in the Dutch churches
Right.
and Muslims. So each of them have their own little nooks and crannies.
So we could probably talk about this for hours, but we're going to stop right now.
So I apologize.
The key thing, east gate, east of the city, east of the city, Mount of Olives, just to give you an idea, cemetery there. Okay, so we're going to move forward in Ezekiel a little bit. Ezekiel 33, I think I already mentioned, Jerusalem has fallen. Message comes to the people in captivity, Jerusalem has fallen, and the book takes a different turn. So Ezekiel's been prophesying, it's kind of been going on. So we're going to jump to Ezekiel 36 and look at some places. Because part of what happens is now that Jerusalem has fallen, the prophet will begin to bring hope that God has not finished with his people. Even though the temple will fall, even though the Spirit of God, the glory of God has left the temple, God is not done. So in Ezekiel 36, the prophet says this, therefore, say to the Israelites, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It is not for your sake, people of Israel, that I am going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name. So that kind of fits our whole study, right? Why does God do what he does? He does it because Israel's so amazing and unique and he loves them so much. No, not for them at all. They have actually gone against him, but for the sake of his holy name, which they have profaned, I will show you the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations. The nations the name you have profaned among them. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the sovereign Lord, when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. So you can see a little bit of last week. when I am proved holy through you. That process of I'm setting you apart and it, as a representative of me. So people look at us today when we bear the name of Christ, and part of the association is how we live should model our uniqueness, our holiness. Again, not just because we're goody two-shoes and better than everybody, because we're different, we're marked by God, and we're growing into that reality. Israel had problems, but God says, listen, I'm not done with you, not because you're so great, because this is my name that's at stake. My reputation is at stake because I placed it among you. A little bit later in chapter 36, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I cleanse you from all your sin, I will resettle your towns, and the ruins will be rebuilt. So chapter 33, it's broken. Chapter 36, I will resettle. You will rebuild. The desolate land will be cultivated instead of lying desolate in the sight of all who pass through it. They will say, this land was laid waste, but has become like the Garden of Eden. Well, that's a very important idea. We'll cover that as we go through. The cities that were lying in ruins, desolate and destroyed, are now fortified and inhabited. Then the nations around you that remain will know that I, the Lord, have rebuilt what was destroyed and have replanted what was desolate. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will do it. Any questions?
What year did he do it?
What year did he do it? We don't know yet. That's part of the fun of this part of the book of Ezekiel. Because throughout the prophetic corpus, there is an already and a not yet. So God makes these promises, these prophecies through his prophets. And there's something usually about the particular time and place that prophecy matters, but it also might be pointing way out there. So some of the prophecies that we look at, for instance, in Jesus, they'll be born of a virgin. A virgin will be with child out of Isaiah. You could look at the particulars around that, and there was a young king that was part of that already prophecy, but he wasn't the ultimate fulfillment. The ultimate fulfillment comes from Jesus. And so we've got this already and not yet. And what is the tension here in Ezekiel is very much there. Because what the people want is the already. And what God's sometimes talking about is the not yet. I want the already. Yes. Red Sunday. In that day, in that time, there'll be no more mourning, no more death, no more sickness. I'm ready for that. I would like that already. Anybody else?
Yeah.
But it's a not yet. It's still to come. And so we've got this tension that exists in the book of Ezekiel. So this is the promise. The people will return. But in this promise, here's the not yet part of it. A few verses before this is what God says. He says, they will say, this land, did I go the wrong way? Yes, I did. I will give you a new covenant promise. I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. And then listen to this. Then you will live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. Here Sunday sounds a little bit like Revelation, doesn't it? The voice from the throne said, now the dwelling of God is among men, and I will be with them. And they will be with me, and I will be their God. Well, echo. What's going on? So this is the tension. For Israel in captivity, what do they want? They want to get back. They want to be out of captivity. They want to return to the land. They want to rebuild the temple. They want to do all of that stuff, right? But it's possible that, like us, they're such in a hurry to do the stuff that they miss the big point. Because one of the promises that unfolds isn't just this, but in chapter 43, we hear this from God. He says, then the man brought me to the gate. This is a vision that Ezekiel's having. Ezekiel's having all these kind of out-of-body type vision things. Then the man brought me to the gate facing east. That sound familiar? We talked about that a lot, right? And I saw the glory of the God of Israel coming from the east. If you're in the gate facing east and he's coming from the east, where is he coming from? Right, the Mount of Olives, coming down that road. Coming in. And his voice was like the roar of rushing waters, and the land was radiant with his glory. So the glory of God left. Now the glory of God's coming back. Oh boy. The vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he came to destroy the city, and like the visions I had seen by the Kebar River, and I fell face down, and the glory of the Lord entered the temple through what? Any guesses? Gate facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. All right, now we're talking. This is getting good, right? Chapter 44. No, yeah, 44? I think so, yes. Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. And the Lord said to me, this gate is to remain shut. Well, wait a minute. I thought he was coming back. This gate is to remain shut. It must not be open. No one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of the Lord. He is to enter by way of the portico of the gateway and go out the same way. So if you go to Israel today and you were to say, where is this east-facing gate? You might see, oh, wow, this is crazy. This is the walls of the city. And this is the east-facing gate. Now, a lot of people point to this and say, look, it's walled up, and it is. It's barred up. In the 1500s, that happened. They shut that gate. They bricked it in. And one of the reasons is, do you see this here? Can you see what this is? Can you see the headstones? This is not the same cemetery. You might can see them down here. This is a Muslim cemetery. This is not a Jewish cemetery. This, closest to the wall now, is a Muslim cemetery. So as holy as the cemetery is a little bit up the mountain is to the Jews, this one is. And so part of it is, the Crusades and all that, the different conquests of the city have happened over the course of hundreds of years. And so this gate is barred up. Now, a lot of people might say this is fulfilling this prophecy. There are a few problems. One problem is this was not there when Jesus walked the earth. This was not there when Ezekiel wrote. The actual gate that would have been there when Jesus was there is about right here, buried under all of this. Because what happens, and if you go there, you notice this, you go to sites and you can see the strata as they've done archaeological digs. For instance, the village of Capernaum, which is called the village of Jesus, up in the Galilee. You walk in, and the largest, most extant structure is a Byzantine synagogue. Byzantine is way later, 115, 16, 1700s, 13, 14, 1500s, when all that happens. The Byzantine Empire comes in and conquers. And so that's here, and they dig down, and you go over here, and like 10, 15 feet down, they've dug out the outlines of houses that would have been there in the days of Jesus. So the Byzantine temple is here, and way down there, dug out. So it's the same thing here. Jerusalem and other cities, when they conquer it, kind of gets destroyed, and they deal with that, and they make another layer and just build up. So this gate, it's probably not the same gate, but it still is pretty interesting, isn't it? Still is pretty interesting that that gate is barred up. And so here we are, that happens in the 1500s, but we go back to this, chapter 43, the Spirit of the Lord lifted me up and brought me to the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The glory of the Lord filling the temple is a pretty consistent theme throughout the Hebrew Bible, right? So we go to Exodus 40, and Moses is in the wilderness, and he's given the instructions, build the tabernacle, right? Build the tabernacle, and he builds it. And after he builds it, they dedicate the tabernacle. And any guess what shows up when they dedicate the tabernacle? Glory of the Lord. Exodus 40, I wrote down the reference in case you want, in verse 34 and following. It says the glory of the Lord fills the place. And then that temple, that tabernacle goes with them in the wilderness, and the glory, the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, and all that sort of God's presence is tangible and there, and they move. Then they get into the Holy Land, they settle the land, and way later, they finally, under Solomon, build a temple on this particular piece of property we've been talking about in Jerusalem. And Solomon, 2 Chronicles 7, dedicates the temple, and guess what shows up? The glory of the Lord fills the temple. And of course, we know, as we were reading about Ezekiel, that in spite of God's glory being there, Solomon, well, after he dies, there's a split in the kingdom. We have a northern kingdom, a southern kingdom, and things don't go so great. And the northern kingdom is taken into captivity by Assyria in 722 BC. The southern kingdom, where Jerusalem is, where Judah is finally conquered and the temple destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians. This is where we are in Ezekiel's story. And as the people are carried away, and they've heard these prophecies of people like Ezekiel saying, God will bring you back and you will rebuild. One of the things that happens is after a period of time, they're allowed to go back. Babylon falls, and the Medes and Persians and all of this stuff comes along, and then it's Cyrus that allows them to go back. And they go back, and we have two big leaders, Nehemiah and Ezra. Nehemiah is the builder who builds the wall. Ezra is the scribe who is concerned with rebuilding the temple. And they go back. Nehemiah does his work, and Ezra does his work. By the way, Ezra and Nehemiah is a single scroll in the Hebrew Bible. We have them separate, but they're kind of one story about this return to the land. And they rebuild the temple. And when they rebuild the temple, you know what they do? They dedicate the rebuilt temple. And in Ezra 6, we read about the dedication of the temple. Let me just read. Now, you got to think this is going to be big, right? They're rebuilding, they're rededicating the temple. This is the fulfillment of everything that God had promised through his prophets. And in Ezra chapter 6, beginning in verse 15, this is what we read. 6:15, there it is. Nope. Where is it? Okay. The temple was completed on the third day of the month of Adar. It is the fifth day of Adar, so that doesn't help us today. In the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the isle celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. For the dedication of this house of God, they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and as a sin offering for all of Israel, 12 male goats, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And they installed the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God at Jerusalem, according to what is written in the law of Moses. Is anything missing? What doesn't show up in the story? The glory God. What could that mean? Because we just read that the Spirit lifted him up and brought him to the inner court. The glory of the Lord filled the temple. What are we missing? Good question. Maybe we're missing this. Psalm 114, the Word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory. Oh, what? You've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The word in Greek there could also be translated tabernacle among us. It's the Greek equivalent of the word tabernacle that Moses led in building in the wilderness. And when he dedicated it, at the end of Exodus, in chapter 40, toward the end of the book, he dedicated it. The glory of the Lord falls, and one of the things that happens is he can't go in. And interestingly enough, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus comes, and what's Leviticus? It's all of these laws. I think this is a little detail I should have mentioned earlier. So the end of Exodus, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So he built it, but he couldn't go in. Then Leviticus comes along, and we get all of those laws, and they're all that detail and all that craziness, right? And what comes after Leviticus? The book of Numbers. And how does the book of Numbers start? The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting. The glory of the Lord at Exodus fills it. He can't go in. Here's the sacrificial system. Here's the law. Here's how it works. It worked. Because in Numbers, guess where it is? It's in tabernacle. I think that's pretty fascinating. Well, the book of Leviticus is the interim. How do we who are outside make our way in? Book of Leviticus lets Moses do that. Glory of God had come. And so then we get to Jesus. And one of the ways John describes him is this, that he's tabernacling among us, and we see the glory, the one and only who came from the Father. So the tabernacle with glory, that's an image that for John's readers, they're like, I know what he's talking about. I understand this. And Jesus' life unfolds, and 41 days old, guess where he's taken? Temple. Simeon meets him there. And we don't have this recorded, like it doesn't say this specifically, but traditionally, guess where the dedication of firstborn sons happens? Come on. What gate? Any thoughts?
East Gate.
Eastern gate. Again, it doesn't say that in the text. You're not going to find that in John or Luke where it records it. It says he was at the Eastern gate, but traditionally this is kind of the site it's associated with that particular thing, which is pretty interesting. And then we move forward a little bit. What other things do I have here? Oh, yes. Move forward a little bit. And Jesus ministers as an adult for 3 years, and he makes his way back to Jerusalem just before his death. And we celebrate his entry into Jerusalem on the colt of a donkey on Palm Sunday. And where does he start that trip? Starts it on the Mount of Olives, right? Starts on the Mount of Olives, and he comes down the hill, and all the people are crying, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna to the Son of David, and he comes into the city. And what's his first stop when he gets in the city? Any guesses? He comes from the Mount of Olives, it's down the slope from the east side, so he goes in the east gate of the city. His first stop is the temple. Do we see glory leave that same route? And maybe Jesus is retracing the route of the glory of God and goes to the temple. Of course, he doesn't go and say, wow, you got it right. He goes and says, wow, you got it wrong. And upsets the apple cart quite literally, or at least the ram and sheep cart. And that begins to turn the tide so that a few days later it goes from Hosanna to the Son of David to crucify him. And he dies, and I wish I could tell you the city where he died was out on the east side, but we already covered it's not, it's on the west side. But after he dies and he's buried, what happens on Easter? He rises again, and after he rises again, he spends a period of time with his disciples, 6-7 weeks with them, and then he goes and he guesses to the next spot. We see Acts chapter 1, and I'll just read it. After he said this, he was taken up before their eyes. We call this the ascension. And a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go. And all of this happens on the Mount of Olives. That's where he goes. Mount of Olives is a key factor in the life and ministry of Jesus. He's taken into the heavens from the Mount of Olives. And then when we think about fast forward, we have to go back. And how about a little Zechariah? Everybody loves Zechariah. Zechariah 14. We looked at Zechariah 14 last time. We'll look at another passage this time. The angels dressed in white tell them he's going to return the same way. Zechariah has this vision. He says, on that day, his feet will stand where? What? Of Jerusalem? East of Jerusalem. And the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley. So has that happened? No. Still a mountain. There's no valley. Not only that, with half the mountain moving north, half moving south, you will flee by my mountain valley, for it will extend to Azel. You will flee as you fled to the earthquakes in the day of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. The Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. Is that something that sounds familiar we talk about at all in church world? And where does it happen? East of Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives, splits in two. And then the next couple of verses. On that day, how about this? There will be neither sunlight nor cold, frosty darkness. It will be a unique day, a day known only to the Lord, with no distinction between day and night. When evening comes, there will be light. How does that happen? On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it east to the Dead Sea and half of it west to the Mediterranean Sea, in summer and in winter. The Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day, there will be only one Lord, and his name the only name. Zechariah 14. And then back to Ezekiel 47. Didn't put it up here, but Ezekiel 47 is pretty wild. Ezekiel 48 is the last chapter. That's where we get the name, the last phrase, the Lord is there. In Ezekiel 47, it talks about that he goes to the entrance of the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple. We just saw there in Zechariah, this idea of water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east. For the temple faced, this east thing keeps coming up, must be important. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you about the graveyard, right? Did I miss that? We gotta back up. Here we go. Palm Sunday, Jesus is coming down the mountain, right? And one of the things they say to him is, tell your disciples to hush. You know, they're kind of getting upset. They're causing a commotion. It's Passover. Pilate's in town. The Roman army's in town. They know this is prime time for Israel to get all uppity. And if they start getting uppity, Roman's going to put them down. Right? That's what they're there for. And Jesus is making a commotion. He's going to get attention. And they say, would you hush your disciples? You remember what Jesus says? If they hush, what's going to cry out? The rocks will cry out. And what rocks are all around them at that moment? It's a graveyard full of stones that not only house people, but people have come and put rocks all over these graves. This is a picture. Like, Jesus isn't saying the rocks are going to cry out like rocks can sing, although if Jesus says they can sing, they can sing. But he's saying, you see these graves? You can shut the living up, but when the dead come back to life, you ain't going to stop that. Right? Anyway, back to the point. Ezekiel 47. So he talks about this river that's coming out, and he says, as the man went eastward with the measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits. And then led me through ankle deep water. And he measured off another 1,000. And then the water was knee deep. And he measured off another 1,000. And that was water up to the waist. And he measured off another 1,000. And now it was a river that I could not cross because the river had risen and was deep enough to swim in. A river that no one could cross. And he said, Son of man, do you see this? And he went back to the bank of the river. And he looks. He says, this river goes and it flows toward the eastern region and goes into the Arabah where it enters the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is dead because it's dead. Salt. The salt content's crazy. You get in there, they say, don't open your eyes. If you open your eyes, it'll be bad news, right? You go and you buy today heavy salt mud and stuff. I brought home mud from the Dead Sea. I said, here, you get rocks and mud. Here, I hope you like it all. People, this is like a very well thought of place. There's something about the minerals of this Dead Sea, but because of all the minerals, and it's shrinking, and the reason it is because it's stagnant water. The water flows down the Jordan River, empties into the Dead Sea, and it has nowhere to go. And the sun is baking it because it's kind of in a deserty area, and as the water evaporates, it leaves behind all these mineral deposits, all this salt. It's not good. Well, here, this Dead Sea, when it empties into the sea, the salty water becomes fresh. And swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be a large number of fish. There will be fishermen will stand along the shore from Engedi to England. There are places spreading their nets. So the picture of Ezekiel 47 is the water flows out of the city and it nourishes, it brings life to it, that which is dead. It's God has returned and split the mountain in half, and there's the water coming from it. And the name of that city is what? The Lord is there. In fact, last two chapters of the Bible, Revelation 21 and 22, also talk about that city. If you look, the word glory shows up several times in chapter 21. It talks about the glory of God as part of this. This is what we read a little bit of Sunday, the new heaven and new earth, where there's no longer any sea, and the new Jerusalem, the bride that comes down out of heaven, and the beautiful city, the pictures of it that's used the measuring rod of gold to measure it, its gates and its walls, and it's laid out like a square, and it's 1,200 stadia, or if you look in your notes, 140 or 1,400 miles cubic. It's a massive city that's there. And its walls are 144 cubits thick, and it's made of jasper and gold and glass. And then in chapter 22, the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, it's flowing from the throne of God and Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. See all these images, Ezekiel and Revelation now, that already and not yet, that the glory of God that left from that place will return. And when it does, it's not just what we talked about Sunday, but it's a whole reimagining of everything. In fact, the heading of chapter 22 in my version is Eden Restored. What you think about Eden, like we read in Ezekiel 47, it's all sorts of fruit trees, and it's the water teeming with all manner of fish, and the sky teeming with all manner of bird, and the man and the woman placed in the garden, thriving among all of this abundance. And then we blow it, and we blow it again and again and again, and God sets people aside, and he says, you're my people, and he builds them into a nation, and they blow it, and they blow it, and they blow it, and they blow it, and God says, I'm out of here, my glory's gone. I haven't given up on you, but my glory's gone. But no, I'm going to bring it back, and when he brings it back, oh, it's a good day, right? So we got the Lord, our righteousness. Step one, I have been saved because he credited to me his righteousness. And the Lord who makes you holy, or the Lord who sanctifies you, I am being saved. I'm learning what it means to be his, and I'm being set apart a little bit more each day, preparing myself for the time when, as Ezekiel ends, I'm in the place, the city that's called the Lord is there. I will be saved, and I will stand in that renewed paradise of God, and his glory will be the thing that is unmistakable about what he has done and what he will do. And that's all I got to say about that. Yes, sir.
Quick question. Is there any indication from Ezra and Nehemiah or some other writings that they were disappointed or had expectations that the glory would return when they rebuilt that temple? You know, when Ezra rebuilt it, do you think they were anticipating it, or were they disappointed?
I think they were absolutely expecting. This is me. I wasn't there in 2000. I think that's what marked them as God's people, his presence. And every time they had built and dedicated something, glory of God showed up.
So I wonder how they explain that through that 500 years before Christ came, or however long. And
there are writings. There are writings in the interim and afterwards that said that Ezra's temple was a corrupt temple.
Oh, okay.
So but it's not biblical.
I understand, but historical, right? Now,
So it's the people looking back and saying, if the glory didn't show up, if that's how it worked, there must have been something wrong about it.
Yeah.
Part of what Nehemiah does, right, is part of how Nehemiah affects the life of Jesus is some of his harshness, particularly toward non-Israelites.
Yeah, in the end, he was like mad and justifiable anger.
Because if God's, listen, we didn't do it right. We're going to do some things to make it right. And out of some of that extremism comes the Pharisaical line of the view of the law. That can trace somewhat back to Nehemiah and some of that sort of thing that goes on. So yeah, there is few hints in the scriptures that the people were discontented. That they knew something wasn't exactly right. It was just off.
Something's missing here.
Right. And they expressed it in various ways. And so here we have the benefit of hindsight and seeing the glory of God show up in the person of Jesus. And we go, oh yeah. And part of what we didn't talk about that we probably could talk about is I don't think the intention was that the temple was ever to be rebuilt.
That's what I was getting at.
Or Solomon. Or Herod.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting to. I know the prophecy of Jeremiah for them to return, but was he ever told to rebuild that temple? I'm just curious what you thought, because it made me think when you were saying the glory didn't return. It's like, well,
Yeah, I mean, what with the New Testament idea, what's the temple?
Yeah, no, right, yeah.
We are
Right.
the temple. And what lives within us? The Spirit of God, right? So the vision that was to be fulfilled wasn't a physical place, but it was a people. The reason he chose Israel was as a people, and the place, you can look at Hebrews, which we spent a lot of time in, points to the physical place, points to a greater reality, a heavenly reality that the people of God are supposed to grow into. That's the our being saved, the sanctified part that ultimately Jesus comes to fulfill. So yes, that's safe.
Yeah,
That makes sense. We're on the same track, I guess.
makes sense.
All right, anything else? It's after 7. I went long. Good, done. All right. Thanks for showing up. I will pray and then we'll call it night. Father, we thank you for the hope that we have through your Son Jesus. We thank you that in him we beheld your glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And thank you, but because of what he has accomplished by his life and death and resurrection, that we are your temple. We as your people are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And part of the privilege we have isn't we don't have to go to a building somewhere, but we can approach your very throne of grace with confidence, come into your presence with thanksgiving and with singing and with joy, and there receive grace and mercy to help in our time of need, all because of what you have done for us. Father, help us who have been saved, that as we grow in you, that we will increasingly be saved as we grow in holiness, as we understand what it means to be your people set apart, looking forward to the day when we will be saved. And in that day, knowing that though we see now but a poor reflection in a mirror, then we will see face to face your glory. That place where there's no such thing as night. There's no need for the sun because you yourself are the light. Thank you for the hope that we have. Help us to live it out a little bit each day, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.